Hello, and kudos to you if you've made it this far. It's not been an easy journey, but you stuck to the course and we're here for something new. Now, if you can remember earlier in this tutorial when we did data types, I did mention we had some other kind of data types that are a bit of a combination of the others that we looked at, and they are not primitive data types. In fact, sometimes we refer to them as data structures. In this video, we are going to be looking at one of them, which is arrays. Now, arrays are very important in programming as they let you store data in a way that each value has access to the next one, because there's a connection and a link between each of them. Arrays are basically just lists of values. So several values put into a list, and each of them are ordered by indexing or by numbering. So a good example would be like a class attendance. So for instance, you go to a class and there is an attendance that you need to mark, and on that attendance you have the name of each student in that class. So you would see something like number 1 could be John, all right, 2 on the list could be Mary, 3 on the list could be Jane, the 4th person could be Peter, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is how a list goes, maybe a list of attendance. Now, an array helps you to store this kind of data such that you have these values here and they are ordered by a numbering. Okay, and so since they are assessed by numbering, you could ask who is number 3 on the list, and we could say number 3 is Jane. Okay, or we could say let's go through the list and we start from John, Mary, Jane, Peter. Why? Because they are all listed in one place, so they have access to each other, so to say, because you can go from the first one to the last one, and you can actually just pick a specific number for and get the value or the record or the name that is on that row. So how can we represent this in an array? Well, an array is still a value. So if you remember how we define variables, var, the name of the variable, okay, and the value equals to the value. So the array comes into the value part, okay, and the name of our variable can be, well, anything. So we're not learning anything new other than the fact that we want to see how an array looks like in this value part. So let's create an array and store it in a variable. So I just want to call my variable names, and now for the main thing of this course, how does an array look like? Now, it's very easy to create arrays in JavaScript, and how you do that is by opening a square bracket and closing the square bracket. This is an array in JavaScript. Okay, so very easy, right? So square brackets creates an array in JavaScript. However, this array currently doesn't have any value stored within it. You know, like we just saw the list of names. Assume you just got a fresh attendance sheet and no name has been written on it. Yeah, this is what we just did now. We just created our attendance sheet, which is our array, but there is no name on it. So how do we put names in it? Now, our array can take other values. Okay, so it's a list of values, even though itself it's a value. So what are valid values? You can have strings, you can have numbers, you can have floats, just as we've seen before. Now, if we are talking about names, we automatically know that that's string, because something like John needs to be a string, and that goes in between quotes. So if I do want to add a value into the array, for instance John, all you need to do is go to your array here, and in between the array you put in the value you want to add, John. Now notice how I put in a valid string in here, and that goes in between the brackets of your array. So right now we have the value John inside this array. Now it wouldn't do us much good if we only have one value, right? And as I did mention, we can have multiple values listed within the array. So if you do want to add a different value, all you need to do is come at the end of one of the values and add a comma. And after a comma, you can put in another value. So Mary, for instance. Now we have two values within this array. If we want to see what's in the array, I could just do a quick document.write, and that just prints our array names. Remember, we stored the value of the array into names. I should save that. Typo here. Save, refresh, and you can see we have John, Mary. And JavaScript helps us to automatically format this with a comma, which is nice. So you can see that we have two values stored within this array names. You can still add another if you want to. I'll add Jane, and now we have four names, one more, Peter, and now we have four names. Refresh, and you can see we have John, Mary, Jane, Peter, all stored using an array into one variable. Now currently we're listing all the items in the array by just printing out the whole array. What if I just want one item? For instance, I want to get just Mary or just Jane. How do we do that? Now remember, I did mention that our arrays are ordered by numbering. So just like your attendance sheets, the first name comes as number 1, second number 2, and so on and so forth. We have similar numbering in your array, and this is the first element, this is the second, this is the third, and this is the fourth. However, your array doesn't start from 1, it starts from 0. So the number for the first element here is 0. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So if you want to get the first element, which is John comes at 0. All you need to do is have your array, and which is stored in this variable, right? Open the brackets, square bracket in this case, and within that bracket you want to put the number of the item you want to get. And since the first item is on 0, we can put 0 and you close the square bracket. So what this is saying is, hey, there's an array called names. Now from that array names, I want you to get the item at the 0th index or the 0th number, and the 0 number is here, John. If I should save and refresh, now we can get just John. If I wanted to get Jane, this is 0, 1, 2. So I will change this to index 2. Should save that, refresh, and we get the value Jane. Again, names has all the elements in the array because names currently is the value of the array. Now from the array, we can now decide to get a specific element. Now you might ask, or you might imagine, if we are just going to print out like 2 or 1, why don't we just store each of these values into its own separate value and have something like var name 1 equals to John, okay, name 2 equals to Mary, and so on and so forth. Why don't you just do that and print that to the screen? Well, there are cases you would certainly want to do that, but there are benefits that storing values within an array gives us. Like I did mention, the elements in your array have access to each other, and so there's that connection that exists, so we can easily go from one item to the next. And a very simple way we can do that is to leverage through the indexing of your array. So how does that work? Now, say we want to list through each item in the array one after the other, and not what we just did here where we let the browser print out all the items, but we want to print out every single person from the array. How can we go through that list? Notice that names, to access each item in your array, you use indexing, which is just numbering, and we can go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to as many elements as you have in your array. Now notice that there is an increment there, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we did see something that does increment for us, and if you guessed it, is the for loop. So using a for loop, we can actually go from one number to the next. And if we use the for loop and we get that number from a counter or any variable, we can actually automatically find each index within this array. So let's use a for loop. So I'll create a new for loop here, for. Now before we use the counter, but I'm just creating a variable called I. I is a valid variable name, equals to, let's start from 0. Now, so long as I is less than, how many elements do we have in this array? We have 4 elements. So I would use 4 here. Then I plus plus, which just increase the number of I. Open my bracket, and within here I want to do documents.write line and close the bracket. So what do I want to print here? I want to print names, but the value I want to print here, like before we did either 0 or 2, but now I want to get the index of I. So what happens? At the beginning we have I equals to 0. Now, since I is 0, names I would actually be names 0. And what is at 0? John. We get John. Then we do increase this to 1. Now, this becomes 1. So we do names 1 and we get Mary, and so on and so forth. Now, until we get to the number 4, and there is this condition becomes false there, and so we don't continue, and so we stop there. Let me get rid of this other line. Should save and reload. Now we can see John, Mary, Jane, Peter listed one after another. But something else, what if I add another element to this array? So rows and save. If I reload, now I don't see rows, I only see the first 4 elements. And why is that? It's because we did stop at 4 elements in our for loop. So I would need to come and change this to 5 for us to see rows. But this is not so good, because that means if I should add a new item to this array, I will need to come and change this value manually. If I reduce it, I would also need to come and change it manually so that we don't have an error. So how do we do this automatically? Well, names has a property called length, and within length just tells us the number of elements we have in the array. So if we have 5, length will be 5. If there are 3, length will be 3. So rather than hard coding how many items we need to go through, we can just make use of names.length. Okay, so this automatically gives us the number of values in the array, and so we don't have to be concerned when we add new items to the array or if we remove some other items. If I should save and reload, now we still get from Jane to Peter. I can also remove some names, and it automatically adjusts without giving us errors. Save, and that's how arrays work. So in summary, arrays are just list of values. Now you can use any kind of values. In this case, we use strings, but it can be an array of numbers. You can have different numbers in the array. You can have different booleans in an array. Whatever value that you want to have within the array listed. You can access each element in your array by indexing, because each element has a number starting from 0 to 1, 2, and so on. And that helps you to get an individual element of that array. However, if you want to get all elements and possibly perform an operation on every single element in your array at a time, you can make use of a loop. When you start a counter from the first index up till the very last index, you can actually access each of the elements of the array and probably do some operation. In this case, we just printed it out to the screen, but you can do something more using each of those elements.